That was Viora with Run, and this is Agent John LeBon coming to you live from Brisbane, Australia on the 4th of February 2016, which makes this the 1-year anniversary since the TransAsia event. Was it a hoax? Was it real? We'll be talking about that and more. And I want to introduce Agent Matrix Dakota live from Spain. Agent Matrix, are you coming in?
G'day, mate. Sure, I'm here, man.
Agent Matrix, I've got some good news. We've been joined at the last minute by the Chief of Station of our New York fraternity. That is Agent David Weiss of Deep Inside the Rabbit Hole. Agent Weiss, do you copy?
I do copy, but my official name is David Cocksucker Wise from Deep Inside P-Gay's Hole.
Of course. I did get the memo from the Chief of Station here in our Australian Bureau. We'll talk more about that and more later, but it's good to be joined by you two tonight. We've got a big show planned. This is, of course, Impromptu Chat number 5. Happy TransAsiaversary. So it's been a little while since the three of us were on air together. I think the last time was Impromptu Chat number 4 back on November 4. So it's been 4 months since we were all together live on the air. So I'll throw to you first there, Agent Matrix. What's happening in Spain lately?
Yeah, man. Just starting my day off here. There's lots of stuff going on. Enjoying doing the research and been doing some experiments lately. So I'll be having those videos up soon. So yeah.
Okay, dead air to start the show. I love that. And Agent Weiss, obviously you've been a very busy man over there in New York. From what I can tell, if there's a Flat Earth show, you're there on it. So give us the feedback. What's been happening in your part of the world?
Well, those are my orders from Central Office, as you well know, to get on as many shows as possible and spew as much flat Earth BS as possible to confuse the people and help them stay unfocused on what's important.
See, what I want to know is how much do we have to destroy this truth movement before they finally give us a break and give us a new mission? Because I've been plugging away at this one for a good 18 months now, and it seems to me the truth movement is dead, but last I heard, I've got another 6-month contract and no end in sight. So maybe tonight we'll finally get to put a score. It's 10:30 at night. I can't even think. How would you describe it? Let's dance on the grave of the truth community. How's that sound, David?
I don't think the truth movement is dying. You know, as I said earlier when we were just talking, there's a lot of truth seekers out there, and it's creating a wave. And if you look at that wave from a distance, you say, oh, that's the truth movement. But if you look, it's a lot of people doing what they can to expose the truth. Everybody has their own style. You certainly have yours, and we go from there.
Oh, okay then. So already 5 minutes into the show, and the battle lines are being drawn, we've got the truth movement.
Shots fired.
Shots fired. Yeah, well, I mean, as many of the listeners to this podcast know, all three of us were there during the TransAsia event 1 year ago, and it's fair to say from my perspective, back then I did believe there was a truth movement, and I did buy into it. These days, not so much. I'll explain why in a moment, but I'll just give a rundown of what we're planning to do tonight. The first day, we're going to look at the TransAsia event, the fallout that followed that, what's happened in the years since, a few of the big names who were involved, just a recap on the whole event to finally put it behind us once and for all, I would hope. And then in the second hour, I know that you might not be able to join us for that one, Dave. In the second hour, we are going to have a discussion about this recent Flat Earth renaissance that has just swept the internet and doesn't seem to be dying in any way, shape, or form. But before we get into any of that, just a general chat about what's been happening on YouTube lately. And Matrix, I know you've been following this very closely. What are your initial thoughts?
Yeah, well, there's all kinds of things happening. I mean, this is life. There's all kinds of disagreements and controversy and things coming out and lots of interesting information, good videos. The pursuit of truth is still alive and well, and yeah, I mean, so much started a year ago with the TransAsia event, and it's at a similar time when the Flat Earth, Renaissance came about, really, and so much has happened in that year. I mean, it seems like so long ago. Hard to believe it's only a year ago, and yeah, it's been an amazing journey of discovery, and I've learned so much in that year. It's just been amazing, really.
Yeah, it has been a huge year, and we went to air obviously tonight. I spoke to you earlier on this evening, my time, and I said, hey, let's just go live. It's been a while since we've had an impromptu chat, and here we are. One of the things that we said before we went to air was it was a year ago today that the TransAsia event happened and the whole schism took place. in a way, it feels like it was yesterday, but in another way, it feels like so long ago that there was this rising truth movement on the internet. The hoax busting community was a big thing, and certain names were big names and they had big followings. And since then, it's fair to say that more or less the hoax busting community has been swept aside. It's a shadow of its former self. Some of the same names are still there, spewing the same nonsense, but for the most part, I think most people have moved on with their lives. And David, that's basically how I see it. Just quickly before we get into a bigger discussion, how would you describe the last 12 months?
I see it a little differently. You know, there was some early leaders in the Google Hangout, chat arena that basically self-destructed. But since then, the truth, you can't stop the truth. People are waking up to the flat earth or the fact that we do not live on a spinning ball. People are waking up to all these other hoaxes and false flags. And I see it growing. You have a little fallout here and there, but it's definitely taking major steps forward in a ever-increasing awakening in numbers.
All right, well, that's maybe something that we can have a bit of a discussion about in a moment, but let's get straight into this TransAsia event. It was a year ago, so I'm on Wikipedia right now. I'll read out the opening blurb from that page just to refresh people's memory what exactly happened. So this is the official story, so just bear with me here. Quote, TransAsia Airways Flight 235, GE235, was a domestic flight that crashed into the Keelang River on February 4, 2015, shortly after takeoff from Taipei Songshan Airport, about 5 k's to the west. The TransAsia Airways flight, operated with a 10-month-old aircraft, was flying from Taipei to Kinmen, a Taiwanese island off the coast of mainland Fujian, with 53 passengers and 5 crew on board. There were 15 survivors. 2 minutes after takeoff, the pilots reported an engine flame out, climbed to a maximum height of 1,500 feet, then descended. The other working engine was shut down mistakenly. Immediately before crashing into the river, it banked sharply left and cleared a taxi travelling west on the Huandong Viaduct, then the viaduct itself with its left wing. Flight 235 was the second fatal accident involving a TransAsia Airways ATR aircraft within 7 months. Flight 222 crashed on July 23, 2014, killing 48 of the 58 on board. Very boring, but the basics here is there was a crash that happened in Taiwan a year ago today, and then what followed from that was essentially a division, a splitting, a schism, as I like to call it, of the so-called truth community. At the time, it had been growing. Many people were involved. I happened to be one of those people who believed in it at the time. I thought that it was a real thing and that even though there was only a few hundred people involved, maybe a few thousand at best, it was growing and we were getting somewhere, exposing the lies of the mainstream media. Event after event, Sandy Hook, Boston bombings, whatever. It seemed like event after event, there were all these people making videos, making websites, exposing the fact that we were being lied to. And then, of course, this event happened. A few people came out and said that it was definitely real. A few other people came out and said that it was definitely fake. Then there were the skeptics like myself, caught in the middle, getting attacked from at least one side, maybe two. And what followed over the next few months was a lot of stuff that, looking back, was all very juvenile. But at the time, it seemed very real. So that's my basic summation of what happened at the time. I'll throw you there first there, David. You were basically one of the leaders of the group saying that the whole thing was fake, so take it away.
There was so many factors, that pointed to something fake, and I basically, if you have one broken link in a chain, the chain's broken. And as I looked further and further, it just became more and more ridiculous. And then we had other people out there pounding their fist on the desk saying it was real, which inspired me to make some great videos, one which I re-uploaded for the TransAsiaversary today on DITRH. Check it out. And to me, it's as ridiculous as 9/11, Boston, and Sandy Hook.
Okay, short and sharp from you. And Matrix, you at the time also were, I don't want to speak for you, but I think you probably were a bit of a believer in the hoax busting community at the time. What were your thoughts, looking back now 12 months on, about the event itself and what followed after it?
Yeah, I was a part of that community, the hoax busting community, and analysing the fake news stories and stuff. And TransAsia came along, and there was a big fallout in the community. I mean, the community was looking good. It's growing, and people were getting along, and then all of a sudden there was this TransAsia thing that split the community, and it split it because like Jeff C came out like a couple of days after the event saying that it was a real event, and many people disagreed with that, and it was too early for Jeff to say that at that point. And so yeah, lots of people were still questioning the event at that point, and there was lots of evidence to suggest that it was not a real event. And yeah, so a schism happened, and accusations of people being called shills with no evidence, just ridiculousness, and it kind of destroyed what was really promising at the time. The community, the truth, what would be a part of the truth-seeking community, and it kind of sent everyone spiraling in different directions. And yeah, it was very upsetting at the time, because you're seeing all your favorite YouTubers arguing with each other, and over this event, which had big question marks over it, and I'm sure we'll talk about some of those things.
Yeah, now see, for me, I think looking back, it was an important process, almost of growing up, if you like, as someone who, once you stop believing in the mainstream media, you start looking for other answers. How can the media lie like this? How can they get away with it? Then you find a group of people online who are talking about the media lies, the fakery that's involved, and you think, here's something. And then when you think that it's growing and it feels communal and collaborative, it's very easy to buy into the idea that this is going to actually change things on a bigger scale. And I'm not too proud to admit that I did believe in that up until TransAsia, and I think you probably did too, Matrix. And David, from what I can tell, you probably still believe in that to an extent. We'll get into that more later. But looking back on it now, I'll say from my perspective, and I'll get your thoughts. Looking back, I think actually knowing what I know now, there never really was a community at the time. There was a very small group of people, and then a lot of people who followed them. And that small group of people were always going to eventually have problems. This was the catalyst that led to it. But looking back, take away TransAsia, was that so-called community ever actually going to go to the stage of making a difference? I would say no. David, what say you?
I was part of that. I started investigating, fakery in the news, and followed a few shows, and wow, this is interesting stuff. But then you could say I broke away and started doing my own stuff, and people started listening to me. And that's how it goes. You have these little pockets of people following and collaborating, and then sometimes there's either disagreements or they just veer off on their own on other avenues of research. And that's the wave I'm talking about.
All right, well, I'm trying to get a few little pictures up so I can screen share them in a moment. So while I'm doing that, I'll just open the floor to the pair of you. Whatever you have to say about TransAsia, what we'll do is we'll talk about the event itself, then we'll talk about the fallout that followed it. So the event itself, David, if you were put on the spot and someone said to you, right, in 2 or 3 or 4 key points, why were you so convinced the whole thing was fake, what would you say?
Well, just the evidence alone, the plane cartwheeled over the edge of the highway, clipping its wing. There was a long stretch of land out to the river, so this thing is cartwheeling. It lands in the middle of the river, supposedly just on a little ledge where it's deep everywhere else except there. And the early videos show people loading stuff into the plane. There's no passengers. There's nothing going on. And then all of a sudden, there's a half a dozen, 8 people standing there, with a baby, completely dry, happy. No one's freaking out. Everyone's just standing there. It was the most obviously staged setup ever, if you just look at the evidence. And then the removal of the plane from the water did not match the plane that we were shown. It goes on, but if you just watch that video that I put up, it shows the highlights, and it's beyond ridiculous. Matrix?
Yeah, I agree with that. For me, if I was to ask about it, I would say that a lot of the footage that we got were from 4 different dash cams on cars, and all of those dash cams had varying times. All over the place the times were. So I think the evidence is very, very questionable. For me, when I look at it, how did the survivors get out of the plane? There was no way for them to get out of the plane. There is a door there, but they couldn't have opened the door from inside. And
how about
go on.
How about the part where they're standing there on the wing, and somebody's supposedly banging on the window on the inside, and everybody's just ignoring the person on the inside? It's complete fakery.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's ridiculous. I mean, that kind of plane crash, there would have probably been no survivors. Hitting that little bit of water, shallow bit of water, would be like hitting concrete, and everyone would have been killed if it was the case. The impact dynamic. Another thing I would bring up is the impact dynamics of the plane were wrong. You've got the wing hitting the concrete road and that wall, and it gets ripped off, and it doesn't change the trajectory of the plane. Whereas you mentioned earlier, David, it was cartwheeling. It didn't really cartwheel, it seems, and it would have been slowed down and probably wouldn't have reached the river. But when you analyse the footage, there is no cartwheeling happening when the wing of the plane hits the concrete road. And it hits a cab, and it just all seems so bizarre and far fetched, and so much of the footage that we saw was ridiculous. Then they had this a woman, some Chinese woman, some survivor they used from another crash. The mainstream media was spinning that as being from that day, from another TransAsia crash. I think it was like something like 6 months earlier in the year. There's so many things wrong with that day. I mean, the water was really shallow, and there they are standing in the water. Then, some other footage of the survivors coming out of the water. At least one of the survivors, alleged survivors, was appeared to be wearing a wetsuit, and they were standing in that water for a long time. And just the whole thing about how they were rescued, it just asks many questions and raises a lot of doubt about.
All right. Enough from you two. Okay, time for someone to inject some sense into all of this. Before I do though, Matrix, what's going on?
I don't know.
You need to mute when someone's talking.
Okay.
We need to buy that guy a proper mic. Anyway, where was I? Oh yeah, now it's time to inject some common sense into all of this. Okay, firstly, you guys say that the event was fake. Well, let's just go through some obvious problems with it being fake. Firstly, this was an event on the other side of the world. Why would they fake an event on the other side of the world, David?
This is sounding very shillish. Why would they fake an event here? The world is the world, and wherever they do it, I say, and this is speculation, that they are trying to keep people from moving around the plane that we live on. They don't want free travel. They want people to be afraid. There's a whole bunch of reasons they could do all of this.
I would have thought the first objection to that thing that I just said would be, well, hold on, what's the other side of the world? Taiwan is closer to me than New York is. So there are a lot of people at the time going, why would they fake an event on the other side of the world? And anyone who didn't instantly think, hold on, the other side of the world to who? I mean, how egotistical do you have to be to think that there's such thing as an other side of the world objectively? It's all subjective, isn't it? So what's the other side of the world to you is not the other side of the world to me for a start. So this idea that there is such things on the other side of the world is ridiculous. But okay, we'll put that one aside. Let's look at the next one then. What's the motive? Where's your smoking gun? What's their motive for faking this one, Matrix?
Yeah, well, that seemed to be one of the big points that Jeff and others were making. What is the motive? Well, we don't really know the motive. We're not in on the secret. It could have been various kind of motives: political, financial, fear-based, mind control, just terrorizing people. There was lots of there were other plane what appeared to be psyops, hoax events, and earlier in the year, it all ties in together. I mean, just because it was on the other side of the world, and we don't know the exact political climate that Taiwan has. I mean, it's a big leap to say that where is the motive? We don't know, but there obviously seems to be some kind of political agenda at play here.
David, what do you reckon? What's the motive?
I'm there with Matrix. I said it before. It's fear. They want people to believe that plane crashes happen with weird outcomes of survivors. So when they pull off something bigger, we'll just believe it. You throw out constant, ridiculous, impossible situations, portray them as real, and basically you're stealing people's ability to think by doing that.
Yeah, okay, that's fair enough. So other side of the world objection, where's the motive objection? How about just the logistics? Like, how do you logistically organize to have a fuselage put in the middle of a river and no one see it? How does no one see the operation being done?
I don't even know if there was anything in the middle of the river. It could have been a drill. It could have been filmed 5 years ago. Green screens and all sorts of stuff. We don't know when that was done. It was probably put together over multiple days, and not necessarily at the time they said it happened.
Well, they could have done it under the cover of night time. I mean, it was kind of secluded with the road there and away from buildings enough so that at night, early hours of the morning, they could ship it in with a crane and drop it in the river. That's what I think most likely happened.
Do you guys ever feel, guilty for the bad things, for tarnishing the reputation of these dead people? I mean, from my perspective, my heart goes out to the families of these poor people, and you guys are discrediting the entire truth movement, auto-hoaxing, making us all look like lunatics. We were this close to getting on CNN and being taken seriously, and then you paid agents came along and made us all look stupid. What do you have to say about that?
Well, we're just questioning the events that happened and examining the evidence and making our best decision based upon that evidence. That's all.
Yeah, well, I think the evidence is in, and anyone who dares to question footage from the mainstream media about a plane event on the other side of the world is a paid agent, probably sent by the NSA, possibly the CIA, it depends, but obviously one of those two agencies, and you've been sent here to discredit all 300-400 truth seekers. What say you?
John, I have a question. Do you actually have like a finger or a toe in a vice while you say that so you don't laugh?
I'm doing my best here to play the devil's advocate, and I've used the best arguments I have against TransAsia being a hoax to you guys, and obviously I can't convince you. Look, from my perspective, I mean, okay, before I tell you guys what I think, how certain are you the thing was a hoax? Okay, you think it was at least probably a hoax? Are you certain? Are you 100% Matrix?
Yeah, I'm close to 100%. Yeah.
David, you're
100% rock solid.
Well, okay. Well, okay. For me, it comes down to if you want to tell me that there was a plane crash where a baby was resuscitated, and then was dry afterwards, or you want me to believe that, these 15 survivors were just standing there in shallow water or relatively shallow, whatever claim you're making, the burden of proof is on you to prove it, and the only information that we've got came from the same mainstream media that we know that we can't trust. So for me, it's not a matter of debunking the footage they give us. It's saying, well, if all we've got is the footage, then why am I even getting, involved in all of this? So for me, I just said, right, the events happen. There are some problems with what I've seen. Could easily be another hoax. Wouldn't surprise me. But what amazed me at the time was that all you had to do was question the event, and you had certain characters coming out and saying, well, you're questioning the event. You want to make us all look stupid. And a lot of people bought into that. A lot of people bought into this idea of, nope, the leader is saying this event was real. We've got to fall in behind him. And I think looking back now, I'm more interested not in the event itself, which to me, probably a hoax, might not be. I can't be certain. I wasn't there. But, for anyone to say they're 100% certain it was real, or in your case, 100% certain it was a hoax, I'm like, well, I don't really know where your certainty comes from. But for me, it's not even the event that was important. It was the fallout that followed it. So why don't we get into talking about that? For those who aren't aware, there was a show called We'll Do It Live at the time, which was it was big. It was the heart of the so-called hoax-busting community, the truth community at the time. It was huge. There were two guys who were leading that at the time. Obviously, old mate Jeffrey and a guy who used to be called Red Pill, now goes by the name Truth Media Revolution. They had a falling out over it, almost live on the air. And they also used to have a friend called PK who would chime in at the end of their shows with the Australian correspondent report. He was in the middle of it. So there was this big schism that was created within a couple of weeks. And then the fallout followed for months after. I mean, really, some of those same characters are still talking about the event. So the event itself really was overshadowed by the fallout that followed it. And really, that's the only reason why anyone's talking about it today. I mean, how many people, if you polled them in the so-called truth community, how many people could even tell you how many dead people were supposed to be involved according to the official story? No one could tell you that. All they could tell you was it led to this big schism, big problem between individuals, a lot of drama, hours and hours and hours of name-calling and nonsense. And for me, that's the big thing that I took from TransAsia. So what are your thoughts? We'll go to you, Matrix. The fallout that followed it, looking back now, if you had to explain to someone who was new to all of this, and they said, what do you mean there was a big argument about this plane crash? Like, how would you describe it to them?
Well, it's not an easy one, but I mean, I think so much was learned from what happened at that time with the fallout, with the people, all the different accusations and just major disruption and how a movement can be destroyed with all these false accusations of shillery and so on. Yeah, I mean, for me, it was kind of a catalyst. It was kind of a wake-up call. You know, it took a little while to get over the disappointment of everyone falling out, but it kind of like made me see, well, what are we doing here, analysing these like mainstream media events all the time, and what is their significance? You know, I mean, the mainstream media keeps lying and putting out fake news, fake stories, or whether it's a hoax or false flag, they keep doing that stuff to terrorise people. And if you're a truther putting out a message analysing these events, and yeah, there's something to it, but once you learn that the news media is fake, then you know you're just going to keep going around in circles, you know, chasing your tail, and it doesn't really lead anywhere. And it was a kind of a wake-up call into what is the truth, what are the bigger issues at stake here. Is there more we should be looking at? And then, you know, then the flat Earth comes along, and it's a much bigger existential issue that covers everything, and it kind of exposes the lies of science and so on. So this was an avenue of research that was, wow, that all makes sense of, you know, starting to make sense of so many different aspects of conspiracy research. So yeah, I mean, it was sad what happened, but then people have grown out of it and gone their own different ways, and some people are still stuck in that mentality of hoax busting, and I think it's a very limited kind of hangout place to be. I think there are much more important issues to be discussed, like where we are.
We will discuss some more important issues later on in the show. There was a good question from the live chat, and hello to all of you there. There's about 50 people watching live at the moment. Exceptional Perception asked, why are you guys wasting your time on this BS? And that's a fair question. Of course, this is the 1 year anniversary of the event. And for those who weren't part of it, you have to understand that for many of us, we did believe there was actually an online community that was building leading up to that event, okay? And if you weren't there at the time, maybe it's hard for you to empathize or to appreciate this, but leading up to that, there were many people all around the world. Yes, it might have only been a few hundred of us, but we did think to ourselves, this is growing. People are starting to wake up to these media fakery events. And so that event at the time was a very sad thing for many of us to go through. Now, some of us, within a day or a week, whatever it took, we were like, okay, there's a lot of nonsense going on, time to move on. For a lot of other people, it lasted months. Some people have never come back. There were people who were big at the time. They've never come back. So even though there's lots of media fakery going on, and it's very easy to expose all of that fakery, and it's important. Many people think it's important to do that. For a lot of people, they never got over the emotional turmoil of believing that there was a group of people who they could discuss these things with, and then all of a sudden the rug was pulled from underneath their feet. So it was a very important event for a lot of us, and a lot of people get into this stuff in different ways. Some people, they find out about the financial system being a bit of a fraud, and then they find out about other fakery, and then some people find out about the moon landing hoax, and then they get into all of this. Some people got into this through the media hoax busting, through what I now call the baby hoaxes. This is how we got into all of this. So in a way, talking about this is just a way to reflect on, this is an important event that happened in our path towards trying to work out what the truth is. And so looking back, it's a way to sort of, I don't know, get it off our chest. I mean, a lot of stuff has been said about it. From my perspective, I didn't really come out and say too much about it until months after the event. That was the whole Sunday sessions. Might have been episode 14 where we were joined by Jeff. And I really haven't said a lot about the event since then. So it was a very important event, and being the 1 year anniversary, that's why we're covering it now. But we're not going to focus on it for too long. We just thought, hey, it's the 1 year anniversary. That was what prompted us to start the Impromptu chat. That's why we're giving it time. So if you don't like that, I do understand. I don't blame you for that. But for those of us who were there, it was a very important event. And we still feel the ripples of it to this day. And that's why it's important to us. We'll move on soon. But David, you've heard me say a few times now that for me personally, I did believe in that so-called community up until that time. That was what woke me up to it, and I've never looked at it the same way since. How did you personally take it? Did you, prior to TransAsia, think that we will do it live and this kind of stuff was actually going to get bigger than it ever did?
It would have been nice if it got bigger, but it's fascinating that somebody that just I don't believe that there's paid agents. There probably are, but I don't know if I've identified any of them. I think there's just people that are, have too big of an ego or are too dumb to see certain things. And when somebody sticks on something that's completely fake, I believe that the people are intelligent enough. They're becoming less fluoridated and vaccinated, and they're able to think. And it may upset them that, hey, this group blew up, but it's not going to stop people. It just, they're still there. They're still moving forward, and they have to come up with their own research. They have to reorganize. If you just look at the amount of people that know about hoaxes now compared to a year ago, compared to 5 or 10 years ago, it's growing, and there was different waves happening, but it's still moving forward. If you just look at Flat Earth, a year ago, there was 40,000 YouTube relative videos if you search Flat Earth, and now we're approaching 5 million. It's gone up 1 million in the last 2 weeks or less. So,
yeah, well, I promise we'll talk about Flat Earth soon.
I was just using that as an example. It's just all of these things.
Not necessarily the best example. We'll talk about that soon. Hey, listen, in the live chat, Sammy Kane says, pretty positive it was a hoax. Flatzilla says that it was fake as Fox, and Stay Clint says he's pretty confident it was a hoax as well. So most of the people in the chat right now seem to think the event was a hoax. The point I was making earlier was I'm not certain one way or another. I wasn't there. I can't prove anything definitively, but just based on what I've seen, I've got no reason to believe it was real. And in the absence of evidence that something's real, the fact that it's on the mainstream media, that for me is enough for me to go with, yeah, probably a hoax. Not enough for me to try and convince anyone else, but for me personally, probably a hoax. And what's wrong with that? And one of the points that I've been making lately is there's a bit of a false dichotomy that's being pushed with just about every event. People want you to choose to be certain about one thing or another. And of course, once you profess certainty about one thing or another, then it's easy to fall into the trap of getting into petty arguments and what have you. That's what we saw with the TransAsia thing. I learned a lot from that personally. And I guess for me, a lot of this is like the sociological learning, like seeing how the group dynamics work, the way that a lot of people pretend to be truth seekers, but then when there's something that looks like a bit of a drama, they'll fall in behind their leader. And, I learned so much from that event. And I guess one of the reasons why I do think this is still an important topic, looking at it at the meta level, is I think we can see some similarities to what's going on in FE right now. And we will talk about more of that in a moment. One of the other reasons why the TransAsia event was so important was because I think this was when the paid shills meme really started getting propagated. Obviously, it's been a big part of these circles for a long time, but TransAsia was when people just seemed to start suddenly saying, hey, listen, this person disagreeing with me, obviously a paid shill, obviously paid to come and disrupt the so-called truth movement. And we only see it growing, more and more every week, the same character saying, paid shill, paid shill, paid shill. This meme has become, something into and of itself. We've got to do there, Matrix. Did you ever buy into the idea that there were paid shills everywhere? Do you still believe it? What are your thoughts on it now?
No, I haven't bought into that. I mean, on the Ball Lab Skeptic show, I've discussed that, how I don't think there are paid shills around as much as there are trolls, at least. I mean, I think there's some good evidence that there is paid trolling, organised trolling going on. That was my point of view then, and that's what it is now. I mean, there may be shills, but it's hard to prove it, and without evidence. I mean, just people calling each other shills with no evidence, that's just really it's just bad research, and it's just trying to colour people's minds and tell people how to think about various different topics. I mean, that's one of the problems with someone like Jeff C is telling everyone how to think and what not to look at. And, if you're a truth seeker, you should be able to look at any subject matter and then, based upon your research and evidence that you see, make up your own mind rather than following someone and just believing in them.
Okay, so you don't buy into the paid shills meme now, but did you at the time, or did you at any point last year buy into this idea that there were paid agents on YouTube? I mean, this is the meme. The meme is this idea that there are people who are paid supposedly by the government or by these agencies, right? And their job is to come down to YouTube with a few hundred or a few thousand subscribers, pretend to be a truth seeker, and then put out disinformation, cause problems, whatever. And I have said openly before, I did used to buy into that, and I never really spoke about it publicly because I didn't think that helps. I mean, if there are paid shills, the last thing you should do is talk about who you think is one, because that just helps the whole division in the first place. But I did buy into this idea that people like Jeffrey were sent to divide, and it's only now that I realise there's no such thing as a truth movement. You can't divide something that doesn't exist, and even if you could, who's paying these people to do that? Can you think of the logistics that are involved in trying to. I mean, I don't buy into that meme anymore, but I can't really sit here and judge people who do buy into it because 12 months ago I was one of them. David, what say you?
I agree with that. I think there's a lot more evidence leaning towards people being mind controlled. Mind control is a very simple thing. You get somebody, you get them in isolation for a little bit, you hypnotize them, you tell them, this is what you believe, and you're going to go out and do your best to prove it, and they'll go out there making ridiculous arguments if those are the best arguments they can come up with, and that's a clear sign of hypnotic type mind control.
Sure. I guess from my perspective, one of the things that I didn't want to buy into was this idea that, conspiracy theorists are paranoid because, that's this thing that's propagated in the mainstream media. So when I saw people acting paranoid, I guess it was easier for me to think, no, they've got good reason to think there are shills everywhere. They've got good reason for it. But sitting here now, 12 months on, I can see actually the paranoid conspiracy theorist, it's like almost any stereotype. Yes, it can be overplayed, but maybe there is some truth to it. And I think a lot of their interest in all of this is this idea that, I'm one of a few thousand people around the world who knows something, and they're sending people to come and target me or distract me or whatever. It allows someone to overinflate their own sense of importance or the sense of importance of what they're doing. I mean, at the end of the day, there's only a few dozen people who are really producing any original content in these circles on YouTube. That's the reality. There's a few hundred more who make their own videos, but very rarely presenting anything new. And then you've got a few hundred, maybe a couple of thousand people who watch these videos. It's easy to believe that this is going to make a big difference and that they've got to contain us. But if you think about it more broadly, is anyone here really that much of a threat, David?
I look at it differently. I think that this movement is growing. You're a lot more pessimistic than me. I'm a little more hopeful, and maybe part of that vision I have is my hopefulness. But I actually see it growing. I don't see it dying off. The truth is the truth, and the truth will prevail. But it just takes time.
Yeah, okay, that's fine. I love your optimism. What I'm saying is there anyone on YouTube or the few dozen people making videos, are they actually important enough, making enough of a difference for it to be in anyone's interests to pay someone to come down here, to disrupt them, to stop them from changing the world? I mean, that's what you have to buy. If you want to buy into the paid shills meme, you've first got to buy into, whether you realize or not, the belief system that what's being done here on YouTube is actually changing the world. And what I'm doing now is I'm questioning that belief system. I think, hey, I'd love to think that the videos that I make are changing enough of the world for them to come and target me. That'd make me feel really good. But is there actually any evidence for that?
There is. And let me just correct my statement earlier when I said there is mind-controlled. I don't think there's that many mind-controlled people. If there are, there may be a couple, but that's easy. I just think there's a lot of people out there that just have ego issues and are spewing garbage. But what was your exact question?
All right, here's where I'm going with this, okay? And again, I openly admit I used to buy into the idea that, not definitely, but that there were probably people who were paid to come down here, pretend to be genuine truth seekers, but actually be sent here to disrupt. And by the way, that's still possible. Anything's possible. What I'm saying is I no longer believe in that because I've questioned the underlying premise that what's being done here on YouTube is making enough of a difference to be worth disrupting. Now, we all want to believe that the videos that we're making and the content we're producing is changing the world, like the whole world, right? Because of course it changes our own world. We get to create whatever world that we want, and so the work that we're doing, those who are influenced by it, those who are influencing those around them in the real world, of course that's making a difference. But the whole world, the overall lie system, the idea that making videos exposing Sandy Hook on YouTube is going to bring down the whole lie system. Really, is that based on any solid evidence, honestly?
Well, the idea that one person, that possesses their true power, that disconnects from the so-called matrix, is more powerful than 1,000 people or 1,000,000 people that are asleep and disconnected. So yes, our videos are waking people up. I am overwhelmed with messages, people saying, I just found your videos, I used to think this was ridiculous, I've looked at this. my website is getting tons of traffic. I have no ads on there or anything. I don't, but people are organically finding this stuff. They're waking up. They're asking questions, and that will spread because once it's like Neo. Once you take the red pill, there's no going back. Once you're awake, unless you get heavily fluoridated and vaccinated, you're awake, and then you're going to wake up other people. You're not going to tolerate sleeping people. So yes.
Can you guys see my screen here?
Yes.
All right, so this is what I call the hoax hierarchy, right? Now, the so-called truth movement, at least up until TransAsia, the vast majority of the videos that were getting made and the live hangouts that were being done, they were focusing on the baby hoaxes, right? Small-time shooting hoaxes, ISIS terror hoaxes, really small-scale stuff, essentially just media hoaxes, right? Hoaxes that even if someone wakes up to the hoax, it's easy for them to compartmentalize in their mind. Well, that's just one aspect of the media that's making this up. Maybe a couple government officials, but really it's not that big of a thing. It was just baby hoaxes that were being focused on. Why, even if you had 100,000 people talking about the baby hoaxes, why, if you're in control of the lie system, would you want to stop them? Like, why would you even bother? What threat are they, Matrix? Explain this to me. What am I missing here?
Well, yeah, they're not a threat, really. I mean, the various things have been going on, 9/11, Sandy Hook, Boston bombings. It's not really changed much, but it helps make people aware of certain things that the media is lying, and it's a starting off point. As you're showing here, it leads to bigger and bigger, more important hoaxes and subject matters to investigate. Can I just go back briefly? Just mention about the paid shields thing. The powers that be control the mainstream media, and they've got their people in place who do their jobs and so on, whether knowingly or unknowingly, they do their jobs. But they also would have an investment in the alternative media. So then you look at people like Alex Jones and David Icke and these kind of people who are quite prominent, famous people with a big audience, and you could call them gatekeepers, and whether you want to equate gatekeeping with being a shill or not, so I'm not sure. But these people seem to appear to be gatekeepers. They're not telling you the whole truth, especially someone like Alex Jones, whose work on not only 9/11 but also Sandy Hook and Boston bombings. He's not giving you the whole truth. He's not showing you all the evidence, and he's trying to control the narrative. So people like this do exist, but whether they're existing at the lower level of YouTube, I mean, the powers that be probably have the intent or plan to do so, and maybe they do have the odd person trying to influence someone here and there. And people can question everybody on YouTube, whether they're telling the truth or whether they're trying to mislead you or what have you. So I think there is the potential for there being paid shills, but being able to prove it is another matter. I think people just have to look at the work that they put out and use their own discernment and glean whatever information they can from people like Alex Jones, because he talks, he does some interesting and some good work, but then he leaves out some of the vital information. So yeah, that's all I wanted to say about that.
Yeah, look, I get where you're coming from. I'm not saying that there are no paid shills on YouTube. Of course there could be, right? If I found out for sure that somebody was, I wouldn't be that surprised. But what I'm saying is, if you're looking at the lie system and the way that they control people's minds with their big lies, their big hoaxes, if you've got a whole bunch of people running around scared about the baby hoaxes and saying they're coming to get us, by talking about Sandy Hook, I'm getting death threats, and you've got to be scared, and never meet people in real life who you've met online because it could be a paid shill and whatever. If I'm the person in charge of the lie system, I'm quite happy to let those fools go along and keep spreading their fear and spreading their nonsense, because ultimately, even if someone wakes up to Sandy Hook or Boston bombings, ultimately, if they don't go a step further and start working their way up the hoax hierarchy, what difference does it make? Somebody can know all about the Cassidy State fake shooting, they can know all about the LAX fake shooting, they can know all about the fake ISIS beheadings and the Sandy Hook, they can know all about that, but if they don't know that there were no planes on 9/11, if they don't realize that the moon landings were faked and that NASA is fake and that all the space agencies are working together because all the countries are controlled by the same people, if they can't even go one step above the baby hoaxes, what threat are they to anybody?
Yeah, spreading paranoia about online shills is an effective way to divide people and to get people to live in fear with the information they've got. So people pushing the paranoia about shills, online shills, constantly doing that, they are doing the job of a shill. That's what a shill would want to do: create division, create paranoia, mock people with foul language again and again, and keep people in that state of consciousness. And some people are doing that, and I think it's not saying that those people are shills, but they're doing the work of the government for them, and it's almost like the government doesn't need to employ shills if people are doing the work for them like that. So
yeah, look, you and I are completely on board with that shills aspect, right? In terms of if you're going around spreading fear, you're doing the work of the people who run the show in the first place. You and I completely agree about that. What I'm saying is this idea that the truth community, which to this day still, for the most part, is made up of those people who talk about the baby hoaxes, right? Even if you've got a strong truth community, if all they're focused on is the baby hoaxes, what I'm saying is, why would you want to stop them? If I'm in charge of the lie system, I say carry on, keep going. This is great. Keep people focused on the fake shootings, which affect nobody. So long as you're not talking about the fact that we can and do fake major media events with no plans on 9/11. Like take 9/11 for instance, right? The majority of so-called truthers to this day still believe that there were plans on 9/11. Okay, that's how hopeless they are. Right? The majority of them never question things like the holohoax, which is something that still does affect people to this day. And they don't talk about genuine NASA fakery. I mean, old mate Jeffrey put out a video in the last 24 hours where he's defending NASA, okay? Now, some people are going to say, oh, that's because Jeffrey is a paid shill. Yeah, maybe he is, but where's your evidence? There's just as much chance that he is a truther, like he honestly believes the crap he's spewing. And even though he knows that everything else on the baby level is fake, he still believes that NASA's real. Now, if there are genuine truthers out there who can know that all the baby hoaxes are hoaxes, but not work out that NASA is a hoax, that all of those space station videos are complete fabrications, if they can work out the red level, but not get to yellow or even orange level, then how are they a threat to the lie system in any way, David? Explain it to me. Please, explain it to me.
There, as Matrix said, it's baby steps. I used to take a lot of baby steps when I was talking about 9/11. I would even wake them up to architects and engineers for 9/11 truth, as a baby step, because you can't take somebody from believing the official story to the truth. At least I thought that for a while. Some people you can. It's getting easier and easier because there is a lifting of the veil that is going on. People are getting, for some reason, it's becoming easier and easier to wake up lots of people. So yeah, lots of these other things are distractions. They're red herrings that take you down, another path that leads nowhere. But again, my journey with these baby hoaxes has led me to the biggest hoax so far and everything in between. So it seems to be working for me.
Yeah, and okay, that's cool. And I think you and I have talked about this before, how it's so easy for us to, if we've followed a certain path, to think, oh yeah, it's so easy to follow that path. It took me a couple of years to go from Sandy Hook and Boston bombings, making my way through to realizing the Apollo missions were fake, then realizing, oh, okay, the reasons why the Russians didn't dob on the Americans was because they're controlled by the same people. Then making my way up to realizing, oh, there were no plans on 9/11. It was a completely made-for-TV event. They faked the whole thing. There's no evidence that 3,000 people died, not even close. The holohoax, that involves all of the mainstream media. That involves Hollywood. I mean, Steven Spielberg won an Academy Award for a so-called documentary about the holohoax, which has been shown, like the actors involved in that fake documentary, they've been exposed as telling lies. He's still got his Academy Award. So you've got all of Hollywood involved in telling these massive, egregious lies about history. Then you look at NASA fakery. NASA fakery is worse than just the Apollo being fake. Like NASA fakery affects us to this day. It affects literally people's worldviews, right? The way they see the world comes from people like NASA. And now NASA are telling us that we're going to go to Mars, and people believe this crap, right? So I've managed to make that path from the baby hoaxes up to kitty hoaxes. Both of you guys have as well. In fact, I think all three of us have gone up to the daddy hoaxes, and maybe this year the granddaddy hoax will become more apparent to people like us. But what I'm trying to point out to you guys is the majority of people who still think that Jeffrey is actually giving them important information, probably even Jeffrey himself. I mean, you guys might be suspicious of him, but until I see actual evidence that he's a paid shill, I have to go with the evidence that I've got. The evidence is he probably believes the crap that he's saying. If even someone like him, who knows about all the baby hoaxes, still will make videos defending NASA fakery. And like, listen to his voice in those videos. Like, he's kind of like pleading with himself to keep believing this. Like the please let NASA be real. If other people can believe in the baby hoaxes but not move on, then it doesn't matter if us three have moved on. It seems like a lot of people are going to get caught at baby hoax level. And if that's the case, why would you try and stop the baby hoax truth movement? Do you guys get where I'm coming from with this?
People like Jeff C., you know, the problem is that there's a lot of people that they'll listen to anything. So they listen to him. He pounds his fist. You know, he says it's been debunked, and that's his evidence, the fact that he said it. You know, people follow that, and it's really sad. And that is the reason, you know, that things get derailed. But once people clear their heads, think for themselves, engage their brains, look at the evidence, and move their egos aside, which is not the easiest thing to do in the world that we live in, and the way we've been raised, they will wake up. And I said it before, it's increasing. The rate that people are able to do that is increasing.
Yeah, okay. Well, look, I think we're probably talking past one another a little bit, because there's things that we agree on, okay? We both agree that it seems like there are more people who are realizing that the mainstream media is lying, okay? That does seem to be happening. We agree about that. And we also all agree that people who run around saying there's paid shills everywhere, that what they're doing is just buying into the fear-based mind control. They're spreading fear-based mind control. They're influencing people who believe in them to affect their own lives. They're getting paranoid and scared and not venturing out into other things. We agree about all of that. The central point that I'm trying to make is that I didn't used to realize that what I was focusing on were baby hoaxes. I thought they were really important, that they were the big thing that were going to wake people up. I didn't realize just how far the lie system went, how much of everything we think is real is permeated by the lie system and this hoax hierarchy. Now that I know that, I'm thinking to myself, I wouldn't, if I was in charge of the lie system, I wouldn't try and infiltrate and stop or disrupt people doing the baby hoaxes. That I would be quite happy if everyone knows about baby hoaxes and gets stuck there. I'd say get stuck there, so long as you don't know that we can fake major events like 9/11 and have no planes, so long as you don't know that all of Hollywood is involved in the whole hoax, so long as you don't realize that every country is controlled by the same group of people, that NASA fakery is European Space Agency fakery, Russian Space Agency fakery. It's all the same thing. They're all controlled by the same people. You know, geopolitics is nonsense. So long as they don't get to that level, they are no threat to anybody. And that's the way I see it now. So looking back 12 months, looking at TransAsia, I think to myself, I can see why I bought into certain lies, because I was operating on false premises. I was operating on the premise that talking about baby hoaxes can make a difference. It won't. I was operating on the premise that there was such thing as a truth community. There isn't. That's why it was so easy for me to get sucked in. I've sucked myself out now, but I can tell there are a lot of people, they're quite happy to stay there. So what we'll do is I'll give you guys both your final thoughts on this topic, and then we'll move on. TransAsia, the so-called truth community, the hoax hierarchy, all of these topics. Give me your final thoughts. Matrix Decode.
Yeah, well, I mean, no, people have different paths of truth seeking. They come to it at different angles. Something will wake them up. Something will get them to question things. For me, it was weather modification. You know, and I'd wondered. You know, I came across this article, and it's talked about weather modification. And you know, I asked myself, well, how come I never thought about this before? And this was the thing that sent me down the rabbit hole 5 years ago. And you know, all these different subjects, they all tie into one another. And you know, like I'd heard about the NASA, you know, the Apollo moon landing hoax, and you know, these kind of things. I never got the significance of them. It was just there in the background. But you know, something like flat Earth comes along, and it gets us questioning everything. And you know, every aspect of life, media manipulation, there's manipulation of science, and so on, our education, our indoctrination, and something like flat Earth, whether you believe in it or not, or just trying to find out the truth about where we are. You know, this subject matter has done more to raise the consciousness and get people questioning the events and things they've been told their whole lives. And it's more powerful than anything else that's been going on, in my opinion. And it's bringing lots of people into the world of truth seeking and finding out what is going on. What is the best evidence? What do we really know? So, and as regards to communities, you know, communities are they grow, and you know, it's about people with like minds, and you know, we're in a world where we're surrounded by people who are, you can call them asleep or unaware. But when you connect with people who have, you know, similar ideas and similar thoughts and beliefs or what have you, it's nice. It's a welcoming. It's a respite from all the nonsense that we're surrounded by. So I really like the idea of these communities growing. These different communities, different ideas, different people, and people gel one with another, and you know, people can make up their own minds. But yeah, I mean, it depends how you get there. It depends how you get to the truth. And there's different ways of doing it. And the news media fakery stuff, that's one way of doing it. But if that's all you got to say, then you're missing the bigger picture.
Yeah, fair enough. Agent Weiss, final thoughts on the first half of the show.
So when you say there's no truth community, you know, I'm not sure what your definition of community is. You know, I used to just talk to one friend about this, and then I started my Deep Inside the Rabbit Hole podcast and do all these other shows. And I've made friends all across the plane that we live on. And we've gathered together, we compile thoughts, I speak with other researchers, so I call that a community. So in my world, there is a truth community. It just swells and breaks into different pockets, but it's a community.
Okay, fair enough. But okay, we're using the term in different ways. And when I'm talking about the so-called truth community, as I call it, the so-called truth community, I'm talking about the hundreds, maybe thousands of people on YouTube who watch the same videos, comment in the same live shows. I'm talking about those people, and to me, the thing that is led by our old friend Jeffrey, that so-called truth community, that thing is going nowhere, and I can't see why anybody would try to infiltrate it. That's just my opinion, but if there are other people out there who are building their own real communities, either online or in real life, with people who they can collaborate with properly, who have common goals and common interests, I think that's totally cool. I'm not trying to take away from that. What I'm saying is this online community that was sort of headed by We'll Do It Live and Jeffrey, I did used to think that was a real community. I no longer do. So that's the truth community that I'm talking about. And here we are 1 year on from TransAsia. And even if they have a community, as far as I'm concerned, they can have it. They can have their baby hoaxes. They can have their little squabbles. They can spread fear about paid shills and people coming to get them and all these other paranoid delusions. They can have that. I've got no interest. I've gone beyond it. And I guess going back to what Exceptional Perception said earlier, like, why are you guys talking about this? This is why. For a lot of us, this was a hurdle that we had to jump. I jumped it with TransAsia, which is why I think if and when something similar happens online again, and I can see it brewing right now, we'll talk about that in a moment, I've gone through it. So for me, you know, I don't have to believe in movements anymore. I can just do my own work, do my own research, put it out there for the world to see. If the world likes it, great. If the world hates it, whatever. I'll take on constructive criticism. I'm not here to be part of some movement because I've learned the hard way, but in a way, the good way, that it's all a lot of nonsense. So, David, you wanted to say something about that?
No, I didn't even know that Jeff C. was back on the internet until the other day. Somebody sent me a link, said, this guy really hates you. And I started listening. I'm like, excuse me. I didn't even know he was back. So I just think that if you don't like something, don't be a troll. Just focus on what you like, focus on what you're researching, gather, you know, group up with other people that think alike, and feed off of each other. Although I do appreciate the trolls at times because they inspire me to make some of my best videos.
Oh, isn't that lovely? Well, I tell you what, I know you have to get going soon, and we're talking about focus here, so let's transition straight into the second half of the show, a topic that I'm sure many people are looking forward to, a conversation about the Flat Earth Renaissance. Now, obviously, the last time we spoke about this, the three of us live on the air, was November, the Flat Earth Renaissance episode of Impromptu Chat. Of course, this is episode 5. That was the 4th Impromptu Chat. We were joined by Patricia late in the show as well, so there was the 4 of us talking about Flat Earth. I guess in a meta context, not the proofs for or against Flat Earth, but the conversation about where it was all going, which ties perfectly in with the whole TransAsia thing, for reasons that are probably becoming more obvious as this show's going on. There are people who believe in this idea that there is a Flat Earth community, and they also buy into the idea that it's been infiltrated by paid agents who've come here to disrupt the Flat Earth community. So what I'll do is, you two guys are both pretty prominent Flat Earthers. You both self-identify as Flat Earthers. You have for as long as I've known, or at least for as long as we've been working together on the Baller Skeptic Roundtable. You always were pretty straight up. You said, you guys were flat earthers. I always said I was a ball earth skeptic. I stand by that. Give me your thoughts. We'll go to you first there, Matrix. The flat earth renaissance, this community that's being infiltrated. What are your thoughts on all of this?
Yeah, well, things are really heating up. I mean, which is to be expected, as people confront the world that they live in. I mean, I think there is a flat Earth community, and there's a few groups of people who are asking the same questions and looking for the answers, and they get along, and others are there to divide the community and with their accusations of shillery and so on, and it's a really interesting point that we're at now. It's a journey of discovery, and people can make up their own minds based on the evidence that they see or presented with, and on their journeys of truth seeking. If they're really into the truth, that's what it's all about. That's why we're doing this. That's why I'm doing it. My journey into flat Earth has been an amazing one. The way I look at the world around me now is different. So many things make more sense. I'm a flat earther because based on the experiments that I've done, like the Bedford level experiment, and recently done them again with even more conclusive results, and the wider range of evidence that I've come across suggests to me that the Earth is flat. I don't know the full extent of where we are, but that's why I take a position of being a flat earther. I don't think we're living on a spinning ball, hurtling through space, and gravity holding us down. There's no curvature to be shown anywhere, in my opinion, on flat water. Water doesn't bend around the globe like they say it does. There's a varying amount of reasons and proofs I could bring to the table. Proofs, in my opinion, which are proofs. Proofs enough for me to say the Earth appears to be flat. So I'd say I'm not a ball earther. I'm not a concaver. I choose the flat model. That's what I'm seeing from my experiments and research.
Yeah, that's fine. And I guess it's very easy for us to get muddled up between the micro and the macro. Now, I understand on the micro level why you're a flat earther. That's cool. What I'm interested in here is the macro level, this meta discussion of what flat earth is to people, especially on YouTube. Obviously, it is growing at a phenomenal pace. Many people attribute our Baller Skeptic Roundtable to being part of the kickstarting of this on YouTube, and I'm happy for people to say that. I mean, I do look back. I've listened to those episodes recently. I thought we put out some pretty good shows, the three of us, and I'm pretty proud of what we did. But what I'm looking at now is, 6 months since our show finished, Flat Earth has quadrupled in size since our show, and it's become its own thing. And what I want is your opinions, and I'll go to you there, David, not of whether the Earth is flat or not, but this broader discussion of what it means to people, what's happening on YouTube right now, and this accusation that people are making against each other that you've been infiltrated by paid shills. Can you see some of the similarities today to what happened 12 months ago? Looks like we've lost David. I should point out for the viewers that we are expecting David to leave us.
No, I'm back. Sorry. I was muted. It's the same as before. People are, say that flat Earth is a distraction from 9/11, Sandy Hook, and Boston. The opposite could be said, that those are a distraction from the flat Earth. They want us laid down in fear, thinking that we're, a speck in an infinite universe with billions of other specks just like us. Flat Earth is an awakening to who we really are. It's more important than any of the other baby or mommy or daddy hoaxes. It's the biggest one that I know of yet. I'm not saying there's not something bigger, but it has brought me to realizations that I never, ever thought that I would even consider. It's really the lifting of the veil. And so I don't see it stopping. I see it having bumps in the roads. I see some idiots, swaying some weak-minded people. But the real issue, why people react so violently, is because the ball Earth, the universe model that we have, is literally a satanic model. And when you take that belief, that energy into your body, you are literally possessed with a satanic energy. And when the truth comes to try to remove that from you, we get these violent reactions. And that's what I see happening. When people say, "Who cares?" Flat around, it makes no difference to me. That is that just shows how really disconnected and uninformed people are.
Yeah, okay, but once again, we're getting caught up in this confusing of the micro and the macro. You believe that the Earth is flat. That's fine by me. It doesn't upset me if people believe they live on a flat Earth or a spinning ball Earth. I don't subscribe to either model. It doesn't upset me what you believe. What I'm interested in here is you two are guys who've seen this right from the start. I mean, obviously what they call the second wave of flat Earth. It was about this time last year. I think February 11 was when Mark Sargent released his flat Earth clues. Got picked up very quickly by a number of other independent outlets, and next thing you knew, he was doing the media rounds, and before long, Flat Earth had taken over the independent media on YouTube and what have you. So it's been about a year now. You guys have been watching it right from the start of that second wave, and you're both pretty prominent within it right now. So what I'm trying to get at here is a more meta discussion of what is called by a lot of people the Flat Earth community. Let's just start with some simple questions then, David. Can you see any similarities between the so-called Flat Earth community and the so-called hoax-busting community of 12 months ago? Can you see any similarities at all?
I mean, it's people using a platform such as YouTube to spread information. There's a similarity.
Do you see any similarities in the way that the vast majority of people involved really are following the leaders, they're not being their own leaders?
Well, there's people don't have time to do what we're doing. They live their lives, they listen in their car on their way to their job inside of the matrix, and they listen and they hopefully decipher the information they get and judge it, and maybe it inspires them to take a look on their own. There are other people that will just believe anything they hear. So yeah, there's similarities, but the information's going out. You keep throwing the information out, it's gonna spread, and that is what is happening. So yeah, there's similarities, but Flat Earth is bigger than everything else, and therefore it will become bigger.
Okay, well, I see a lot of people coming out and saying that Tiger Dan 925 is a shill because he's now come out against the Flat Earth, and he's put out, what, 5 out of 10, ostensibly 10, there's going to be of these anti-Flat Earth videos. He got up to about 25,000 subscribers. He'd been on Patricia's show. Many people liked his work and said good things about him. Now he's come out and said, actually, I'm not so sure the Earth is flat anymore. Some of the arguments I used to believe in, I no longer do. And a lot of people have turned on him. And it's not just the low level, the 90%, as I call them, the followers who've come out and said that. I've seen some of the bigger names within Flat Earth coming out and saying that Tiger Dan is a paid shield sent to disrupt us. Matrix, can you see how someone like myself is sitting here going, hold on, what evidence do you have that he's a paid shield? Is it just because he's now disagreeing with you that you've come out against him so strongly?
Yeah, well, I haven't had much to do with Tiger Dan before or after his videos. So, but yeah, what has happened to him is changing behaviour, and it's more like that people were questioning. I mean, he was out there insulting people like Jeranism, for one, and others, calling all flat earthers liars and this, that, and that. He went on the attack, and people, I'm sure, were disappointed with his approach to. And for me, when watching his debunk videos, they were the weakest thing I've ever seen. Worse than Jeff C. and those kind of people. I mean, the arguments that he Tiger and used and try and sway people. I mean, it's just a hard one to get your head around. It's so ridiculous what he's doing. I mean, sure, people can change their mind and that, but the way he's gone about it is he hasn't done it very well.
Sure, but that doesn't mean that he's a paid shield, does it?
No, it doesn't. We don't have evidence for that. No. Some people will jump to that conclusion. People like with the hoax community, people are going to jump to that conclusion as well. But they don't have the evidence to support that. You can question people and question what they're saying and look at their work and then make up your own mind. I mean, there is a similarity between the similarity is that the community is growing, and will it be destroyed like the hoax community was destroyed because of all the accusations and that. So there's a similarity there, but I think Flat Earth is much, much bigger and is going to be much harder to stop. People will turn around. You get the odd person changing their minds, which is their right to do so, and no one's going to. I mean, you can have the odd person being nasty about it, but the general people involved aren't going to be nasty about those kind of things, and they're just going to make up their own minds and let them get on with it. I mean, Tiger Dan, if someone drops out of flat Earth like he has and gone on a complete 180 in the way that he has, it's going to make people question their motives. So,
David.
Yeah, we don't have a lot of evidence on Tiger Dan. We don't know his real name. Nobody knows where he is, his life situation. He came out with, 75 Bible verses that prove flat Earth, 25, proofs that rocked his world. His face was in almost every video. You could see his passion. You could hear it in his voice. He's an awfully good actor if he's a paid shill. So the other options are, is he mind controlled? Has he been threatened, beaten? How come we haven't seen his face in any of his ridiculous first 5 of 10? Where has he gone? He's disappeared for a couple of weeks. He showed up in a comment on some dumb video that came out the other day, but that doesn't prove that he's even here, because that's just, if he's threatened, compromised, that could be somebody just using his account, making a comment. I'm concerned for him. I don't have any proof of anything, but what is the hardest part to believe is that he actually flipped from his flat Earth belief back to ball Earth like he claims, because his arguments are absolutely pointless, ridiculous, and outright lies, in some of the things that he says. So that's on the bottom of the list. Mind controlled, threatened, coerced into doing this is, farther up the list. Paid shill is on the very, very bottom of the list. And that's it. You have to be able to judge somebody's, personality, what they say, how they say it, how they look, but we haven't seen him. His arguments are weak. Weak is even an overstatement. So to me, I think he's compromised in some way, either physically, spiritually, or completely mind controlled and doesn't even know what he's doing.
Okay, has he actually come out and said he now believes he lives on a giant spinning ball, or has he simply come out and said the arguments for flat Earth, I no longer believe in them? Because there's a big difference between the two. So has he actually come out and said that he believes he lives on a giant spinning ball, or are you creating a bit of a false dichotomy there?
I got to go back, actually. He just said that believing in the flat Earth is ridiculous, and he's ashamed that he ever fell for it. So you can twist that to say that he's back to the ball. He could be a concaver for all I know at this point, but he should have said that if that's the case. So by what he said, one has to assume at some level that he's he's inferring that it's a ball.
Because you guys probably remember on the Baller Skeptic Roundtable, and this was all 6-8 months ago, so things were different back then. I mean, the Flat Earth Renaissance it's another level now to what it was back when we were doing our show, right? Back then, I think it was a little bit more open and collaborative. It was new. People were doing experiments, and they were reading books that hadn't been read for a long time, and they were talking about what they'd found and what they'd thought about. Now, it's not really about that anymore so much. It seems to be more, the bigger it's gotten, the bigger the group think has gotten, the experiments don't seem to be getting done, the books don't seem to be getting read, and the false dichotomies that we warned about, they're still there. They're even worse, and it seems like a lot of the flat earthers have bought into this false dichotomy of anyone who's not with us is against us, and there is a big difference between someone saying, I don't think the earth is flat, and them saying, I think we live on a giant spinning ball. And one of the points that we made on the Baller Skeptic Roundtable so many times, I know that I was making this point because I've been going back and listening to those episodes, and I think I said it on almost every episode, don't get sucked into a false dichotomy. Just because you can disprove one or two arguments about flat earth doesn't mean we live on a giant spinning ball. Just because you can disprove one or two things about the giant spinning ball doesn't mean we live on a flat earth. Don't get sucked into a false dichotomy, and yet we're sitting here, and it seems to me, Matrix, that people are getting sucked into the false dichotomy. 6 or 8 months ago, they were getting sucked into, it's not flat, it must be a giant spinning ball. Now there's a lot of people, thousands of them from the looks of things, getting sucked into, well, it's not a giant spinning ball, so it must be flat. What do you say to that?
Well, I think, people are just interested in the subject. I mean, they're being sucked into it, if you use that terminology. I mean, I don't think so. I think that, some people will be sucked into it, and some people will keep their objectivity and just focus on the information and the research, as part of their truth-seeking thing. I think I don't think it's a false dichotomy. I think we're trying in pursuit of the truth, and depends on what evidence you see and your point of view on that evidence.
All right, let me put it to you guys like this then. What do you say if someone points out to you that a lot of the proofs that are given for the flat Earth are really just arguments against spinning ball Earth, but even if you can disprove spinning ball Earth, it doesn't mean you live on a flat Earth? What would you say to that?
Well, we're still discovering. We're still like looking at the evidence. We're looking for more proofs. We're looking, more and more people that are coming to the scene or whatever, the YouTube thing, and discovering these kind of questions that we're asking. I mean, we're finding out new information. I mean, we've been going at this for about almost a year now, the Renaissance, and we're up against 500 years of mathematics and indoctrination. So we're just searching for the answers.
David.
So it's John, let me ask you a question, and you have to give me a percentage number. What is the percentage chance that we're living on a spinning ball Earth in your mind, your opinion, if you had to put a number on it?
Okay, I'll answer your question. Obviously, it's very hard to quantify these things, but I get what you're saying. Look, there is I would think, a small chance, maybe in the realm of 1 or 2 or 3%, hard to quantify, a very tiny chance that one of two things has happened. Either I have lost my mind and I'm failing to see the proofs that we live on a giant spinning ball, or we live on a giant spinning ball, but there's just no proofs for it, right? And it's something you have to take on faith, right? And I've lost that faith. Like, there's a small chance that that's the case, but I think what I think is far more likely is that I've spent more time investigating the giant spinning ball Earth model than the vast majority of people who walk the Earth today. Whatever its shape is, I've spent more time investigating the claims about the shape of the Earth, and it seems to me that it's dependent on 6 assumptions. The idea that we live on a giant spinning ball is dependent on 6 assumptions, 6 key assumptions, and to me, each one of those assumptions is at best very shaky, and you only need to dismiss one of them, and you dismiss the spinning ball Earth, okay? Straight up, I think I can sit down confidently, even without notes, and discuss this with anybody, whether they're a ball earther or a flat earther or anything in between or anything else. I could sit down and explain to them calmly and rationally why I do not accept that we live on a giant spinning ball. Happy to change my mind if new evidence comes to hand, but based on the so-called evidence I've seen, you need 6 key assumptions, and each of them is silly. So for me,
John,
giant spinning ball is finished. But that doesn't mean that, hold on. That doesn't mean that I believe that we live on a flat Earth, because I don't buy into the false dichotomy. And I've been making this point. You can go back to the first episode of Baller Skeptic Roundtable. I made this point. I do not buy into false dichotomies, okay? And I think you guys, no offense to either of you, I think not only have you bought into the false dichotomy, because you guys both know we don't live on a giant spinning ball. It's crazy. But it doesn't mean that we live on a flat Earth. Can you see what I'm saying here?
Yeah, it depends. I mean, it depends on your point of view. You're a skeptic, and you're taking an extreme skeptic point of view. I mean, for me, it's a case of the evidence that I've seen and the experiments that I've done that leads me to believe that that we live on a flat plane. It appears to be that way to me. So I can't prove it 100%. I can't tell you what the world is exactly and every dimension of it and so on. But that's what it appears to be. I mean, you can take a less committed point of view and say, I don't really know. There's problems with both models. I don't see it as a false dichotomy. It's just where the evidence leads me, and that's where I'm at right now. If someone can show me and prove that there's curvature, then I will change my mind on that. I'm just in it for the truth, and I can't say 100% it's flat, but it appears to be flat to me, so I'm taking that point of view.
John, so you take a much more in-depth look at the spinning ball model and probably know more than the vast majority of flat earthers. But for me, in my business, I look for the weak link in the chain, and if it's broken, I'm done. I don't check out the rest of the chain. I don't need to know about it. It's already broken. And as you said, if one of them's broken, move on. And that's what most of the flat earthers do. They realize the ball's ridiculous. I don't even need to know the rest. It's broken. So what does the evidence point to? Well, the evidence surely does point to flat. I mean, in all different ways. Is there another possibility? We'll throw concave out there. Let's say that's a possibility. I don't believe it, but we'll throw it out as a possibility. Are there other possibilities? The answer is I have no idea. There could be 1,000 other possibilities that we can't even fathom. But the evidence is pointing towards flat. Evidence is definitely strongly leaning in that direction. It makes the most sense at this point in our becoming aware, and that is the tack that I am taking and Matrix is taking. But I am always willing to look at other evidence that will show me it's something else. But we know, as you said, the ball is dead, and that's a major life changer.
Sure, let me pitch something to you though, right? It seems to me that a lot of people, they're stuck in this idea that they were trained into from a young age that they can know the nature of our universe, okay? They're taught from a very young age, read our books, regurgitate what we say, and you can know the nature of your existence. You can know that you live on a giant spinning ball, you're hurtling through cold, empty space. It all started, 6 billion years ago? Earth started 4.5 billion years ago. You can know where it is that you are, right? And what a lot of people don't realize is you're not just being trained to believe what the system is, you're being trained to believe that you can know, that knowledge is, it's at your fingertips, you can know, right? And a lot of people, they realize that what they've been told about giant spinning ball is all nonsense. But what they don't realize is they're still holding on to this idea that they can know, so they look for the next best answer. And for them, hey, that's flat Earth, right? And now they know they live on a flat Earth. Let me put an idea to you guys. I want your opinions, both of you. Is it possible that maybe you can't know, that it's not actually within your grasp as a human without technology that we simply don't have access to? You can't know for sure what the nature of the whole Earth is. You can measure maybe 10, maybe 30 miles. Maybe you don't find curvature over 30 miles, but you're not going to get to traverse the entire Earth. And even if you could, you might not know what's beyond. It might not actually be within any of our grasps to know the nature of our entire reality. And yet, by buying into this idea that we can, that was trained to us from a young age, we're going to go with the best option and say that we know it. Is it possible a lot of flat earthers have gone from knowing they live on a giant spinning ball to knowing they live on a flat Earth, but never realizing, hold on, your problem is that you think that you can know. Your ego was stoked from such a young age to think that you as a single human can know things that maybe are beyond your grasp of knowing. David, can you see where I'm going with this?
Yeah, I do, but you have to take some leaps of faith in our life. I know that I'm wearing this meat body, and that I'm a human being, but in reality, I'm probably something far greater than this avatar roaming this land that we live on. So you have to, if you can't know anything, so you can't walk around not knowing anything. You have to jump to some conclusions, some assumptions, we'll call them, based on evidence, and live your life that way. And if new evidence comes around that something you assumed is wrong, look at it, weigh it, and find another explanation. But you have to have an explanation for everything. Otherwise, you can't navigate in this 3D density that we live in.
There's another person out there who will try and tell you that if you question certain things or say you can't know certain things, then you don't know anything. Everything's a hoax. Everything's a hoax. These people want you to think everything's a hoax. David, I'm not saying that everything's a hoax, that you can't know anything. I know what I can see. I know what I can prove. I've got empirical evidence for a whole range of things. I can live my everyday life knowing a whole bunch of things and be fine without knowing if the Earth I live on is a giant sphere or if it's a flat, infinite plane or if there's a dome. I can live my life fine knowing a ton of things without knowing the shape of the Earth. And what you're trying to suggest there is that, well, you have to know a few things so you can know the shape of the Earth. But it's, again, you're falling into these false binaries, aren't you?
I hear what you're saying there, but the evidence is showing that the Earth is flat. And until I find something that could lead me in another direction, that is the path I am going to take. And I'm looking for more evidence to prove it and any evidence to disprove it. And so far, there's lots of flat Earth proofs out there that don't prove the flat Earth. They prove neither the ball or the flat. So it's not a strike against the flat, but who cares what it's about the ball, because the ball's dead already. We know that. So, Unless there's something else that comes up that shows me that, hey, we live in, it's a hologram or whatever. I'm pursuing knowledge on the flat Earth, how it works, what our role is here, and to help wake people up to that reality until something else comes up.
Well, I know you've got to go soon, and I appreciate you joining us tonight. Let me throw one more thing at you. You talk about the evidence that it's flat. The South Celestial Pole, this idea that in the northern hemisphere, there's a thing called Polaris, and the stars all appear to rotate around Polaris. Everyone's cool with that. No one doubts that. But what some people do doubt is that there is an equal and opposite one in the southern hemisphere. It's not a star like Polaris, but it is a point in the sky that if you leave a time-lapse photo camera on, you'll eventually see what appears to be the stars rotating in the opposite direction to what they do in the northern hemisphere. Now, the spinning ball earthers will say, aha, see, that works on a ball, doesn't work on flat. I've heard some flat earthers say that there is no southern pole star, and until I saw evidence of it, I wasn't convinced that it exists, but now I think it probably does. Matrix, I'll give you a chance first. The southern pole star, does that fit, not the star, the southern celestial pole, that point of the sky, if that does exist, and if the stars appear to rotate around it, how does that fit into a flat Earth model or theory?
Yeah, I mean, we've been talking about it for a long time. There's come up the idea of the southern pole stars and the rotation around Sigma Octantis and so on. And, I haven't seen it for myself in person. I'm relying on just a couple of videos on YouTube that kind of show me that. And truthers are skeptics. And as a skeptic, I question the evidence, and I'd like to see more of that proof before I can make a decision on whether how it affects either flat Earth or globe Earth. Does it disprove flat Earth, or does it prove the globe Earth? Now, we've done so much work on disproving the globe Earth, it leaves one to wonder what really is going on. So it's an interesting dynamic. I mean, we really don't know how the sky behaves or how the continents are laid out, and so on. So it's a really interesting aspect to investigate, but it doesn't disprove or prove one or the other. So, I mean, as I said, truthers are skeptics, and it depends on how far one takes that skepticism, as an individual. And for me, Occam's razor, I'm not seeing the curvature either way. It's not convex or concave. So that leads me to believe that it's flat. I don't think it's a pyramid or square. I don't know, but it appears to be flat. So that's why I take that point of view. And evidence comes along, like the pole stars or the daylight in Ushuaia, in the southern hemisphere. These are issues to be resolved, but that's what we're trying to do, and figure them out. And which model do they fit? What are we seeing here? How does it really work? And that's what the point of the truth seeker and the discussion is about, is to get to the truth of the matter as best we can with the abilities that we have and the research and evidence that we can find.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. You feel you have a lot of evidence that points towards a flat Earth, and that's fine by me. But I mean, you take what David said earlier, like one weak link in a chain and the chain breaks. Going by that logic, if flat Earth model can't account for a southern celestial pole, then wouldn't you have to just reject the flat Earth until you find a way to explain it?
Well, let me answer that. First, I live about 35, 40 degrees off of north latitude, and I can go out on any starry night and see Polaris. It's always in the exact same spot in line with the corner of my roof. There it is, doesn't move all the time, all year long. You live down in Australia. How many degrees off of the South Pole are you? Do you know?
Not off the top of my head, no.
All right, so I think you're about equal, somewhere equal. Is there a spot in the sky that you can see the same star in the same position all the time?
No, there's no South Pole star, but the reason why Polaris is important isn't because it's a star, it's because it's a point in the sky around which everything else appears to rotate.
So hang on. There's lots of other stars around Polaris that are always circling Polaris, and they're almost in the same spot, except they flip around. And I could see them all points, all times of the year, every night. no matter what, it's always there, and so they're going around a center point. Are there any stars that you can see every single night all year long that are in the same area?
Yeah, I believe there is a bunch of stars that constantly rotate around the same area, not around a single star, but around a single point, what you would call the South Celestial Pole. I believe it is there. Now, I don't blame you guys if you don't agree with me because you're not down here, and the video footage that I showed on my channel, it's just video footage from one person. In theory, could easily be fake. So if you guys are saying you don't accept the evidence, that's fine. However,
So,
if we can prove that this South Celestial Pole exists, whether it's me
well,
making my own video, whether it's hundreds of us making videos, whatever it takes, once we get to that point where you guys can see that there is a South Celestial Pole, then what?
well, hang on a second. Let me finish what I was saying, and then I'll address that. You should be able to go out and see the same stars. If it's not exactly there, within a couple of feet, a degree or two, you should be able to see other stars that are always in the same spot. And I don't know if you have done that or if you're just looking at a video and saying, yeah, that makes sense. But until you can do that, you really can't say that they're spinning around a central point down there. However, if that was the case and someone said, look, here they are, time lapse, I see it myself, that means it doesn't, unfortunately, this is, oh, of course, you're showing proof and you discredit it. It means that we don't understand something. That's a possibility. But sure, it would be like, all right, we thought we understood how it works, but that doesn't work. Maybe there's another celestial dome of stars spinning in another direction. I don't know. I haven't seen it. I don't think you've seen it. So somebody just said I'm loud, so I'm backing off the mic a little bit.
No, that's
So there
that's
you
fine.
go.
But where I'm going with this is, again, I can't prove to either of you that there is a South Celestial Pole. So on that, we're all on the same page. However, what I don't want to do is go out and take my own footage, spend the night out there, take the footage, come back and post it online, and then have people going, oh, okay, well, we said it didn't exist. Actually, now we think it does exist, and it fits into our model. And I'm going to say, okay, well, just explain to me how it fits into your model right now. Like, what I would hate to see is people buying into flat Earth model or theory, and then each time something comes along that goes against it, making up an ad hoc explanation for it. If a South Celestial Pole fits into the flat Earth model, then it fits in now, not in 2 weeks' time. So how does it fit in now? And if it doesn't fit in now, would you be willing to back away from flat Earth theory for a while, or are you committed to it?
I would back off looking for another explanation that makes sense without grasping at straws. But you're throwing something out there that hasn't been proven. You haven't seen it. And I personally, from the evidence that I've seen, don't believe it exists. So, we've seen that they're faking all of the 360, midnight sun from Antarctica. So why are they faking that if there is a South Pole star? Because if there is, it would make sense that the sun would have a midnight sun. And it's not the case at all. So you're just looking for a proof that doesn't exist and asking us if we would back off from flat Earth. And the answer is, yeah, I would back off unless I could find an explanation for it.
Yeah, but I mean, if all three of us, one of us won the lotto, not that I think you actually can do that, but just suppose for hypothetical sake, we came into a lot of money and we thought, right, let's just go for a north-south circumpolar navigation, right? If I went on a north-south circumpolar navigation from the top of the top of the world, the top of the ball, right around down to the bottom, and then back up again, I'd say, all right then, for me that's pretty compelling evidence that we're on a ball. And if that happened, then I'd have to go with ball, right? Even if I don't have that evidence at hand now, hypothetically, if the evidence became available to me, I'd be happy to go with it. I follow the evidence. What I'm putting to you now, David, is a hypothetical. If we can prove there is a South Celestial Pole, not a star but a pole, would that then be a dent in the flat Earth model that you follow?
When you say a South Pole, you mean a point in space that all the other stars wrap around, equal,
Yeah, not
lined
space
up
in the sky. There is no space for
in the sky. That's what I meant. Sorry. Yeah, I would back off. I would back off if there was solid proof of that, and I would look for an explanation, but I don't have one at this time.
And do you, how many, I know it's hard to put a percentage on, but what percentage of, say, suppose a leading flat Earth video gets 5,000 views, right? and suppose that, for argument's sake, the majority of those are on board with flat Earth. Let's say 3,000. Let's say there's 3,000 at the moment dedicated YouTube flat Earthers. What percentage of them do you think, if the South Pole star, not star, the South Pole, the South Celestial Pole was proven, what percentage of them do you think would say, actually, time to reassess?
I don't know the answer to that, but there is a lot that don't even understand why there can't be a South Pole star. They are looking at other pieces of evidence, and they've jumped to an earlier conclusion than some of us more discerning people might. So, sure, there's going to be people that you can't break away, just like there's people that you show them proof of NASA fakery, proof that the ball Earth is dead, and they refuse to let it go. So there's mind programming on the flat, round, and concave side everywhere.
Yeah, fair enough. Matrix, you've been quiet.
Yeah. Well, there may be other explanations for what we're seeing in the sky. I mean, we really don't know what's going on up there. We don't know what the sun is, whether it's a physical body or not, and how far these things are away from us. We don't know the exact distances and so on. So, or how it all works and what we're seeing, how our perception and so on. So there's lots of different factors to consider with a piece of evidence like star trails, southern star trails. And it's a case of figuring it out. It's an interest. If it is the case, then it's an interesting piece of evidence that needs to be analysed and taken into account. But then it's also about weighing up the evidence. Does this, like I said earlier, does it disprove flat Earth or does it prove the ball? What does it prove? Is that a false dichotomy there? If you weigh up the evidence, and in my opinion, the flat Earth evidence of no curvature and water levelling out, really. And many other things you could bring up as well. That all leads me to believe that it's flat. So it's a case of Occam's razor and trying to figure it out. I mean, there are different interpretations. I saw a video recently where someone was saying it's to do with magnetism and centripetal force versus centrifugal force, and that's how people in the south see one thing and people in the north see another, and so on. So we really don't know what we're looking at up there. So it's an interesting aspect of the conversation, and if it's proven, it's still just an interesting aspect of the conversation. It doesn't disprove one thing or another. It just needs to be figured out still.
In the live chat, Tedward P says that John LeBon is very negative. We saw this with the last impromptu chat as well, me asking questions. People who have bought into Flat Earth see that as being negative. For me, it's not being negative. It's about asking questions, about being skeptical. It's about trying to search for what answers we can prove. And for me, that was what I found so fascinating about the Flat Earth Renaissance early on, was that there are a lot of people doing this. A lot of people saying, hey, I don't really know what we're on, but that in and of itself is a pretty significant thing. I used to think I knew we were on a ball. Now I don't. Now I'm not so sure that we are. That in and of itself was an amazing thing. And it seems like in the 12 months since then, it's now moved to actually, we do know again. Now we know it's flat. Anyone who says otherwise, they are the heretics and they're being negative. And to me, this isn't negative. This was the whole reason why I found it interesting, saying, hey, what evidence do we have that we live on a giant spinning ball? Not nearly as much as they want us to think that we have. Now I'm saying the same thing about Flat Earth. Do you really have as much evidence as you think you do? Now, David and Matrix have been happy to sit here and answer my questions, and I think that's a credit to them. Can I sit here with people who believe we live on a giant spinning ball and ask these kind of questions? History says, no, I can't, because they get emotional, they get defensive, they start acting like religious zealots, and I would hate to see flat earthers start going down the same path. I think a few already have, but to Matrix and David's credit, they haven't done that. Now, David, I'm happy to keep the show going a bit longer. I know that you need to get going soon, so I'll give you a chance to express yourself, anything you want to say about any of the show so far, and if you can stick around, great, but if not, get your final thoughts in as well.
The listener that said that you're negative says you're joking, I think, but you do come off as a little negative, but that's a good thing. It gets people thinking. It inspires people. You go right to that line where they don't hate you, which is good. But you inspire people to think about harder questions. You've inspired me to learn more about the ball, because I just I don't even need to know that. But everybody has their own style. Discern for yourself. Think for yourself. I love all of the different channels that are going up. I love Jaronism's channels, Globebusters. It's fantastic. Matrix, you're putting out good stuff. John, you're asking tough questions. And that right there is the truth movement. That's the flat earth movement moving forward. It's not unified, but the mass is going to keep on going. Some people are going to drop off because they can't handle it. There's going to be some drama, but we just need to ignore that and keep searching for the truth. John, you say you don't buy either model, but if somebody came to you and said, "Hey, I've got $1 million for you, flat, round, concave, or something else," what are you going to pick?
Something else is what I would pick at the moment. And
All
I'll tell
right,
you what.
sorry, $1 million is not for you.
Well, let me just tell you why quickly, right? Based on what we see in the sky, I think what we see in the sky does fit with a ball model of the world. But at the same time, I think what we see on the Earth doesn't fit with that. And what's more, I'm very confident that we're not spinning, right? So basically, to me, I can see why some people want to believe in the ball. I can see why some people want to believe in flat. For me, I try not to believe in things that I can't prove unless I am admitting to myself that it's faith. I'll give you an example. I can't prove that there's ultimate justice in the world, right? Like I believe it because it makes me feel better. I have faith in it. But realistically, I can't prove to anyone that the people doing bad things are going to get their comeuppance. I just can't prove it. You know what I mean? It seems to me like they've been in charge since before I got here. They'll probably still be in charge when I leave. But I like to believe and have faith, because I can't prove it, that they'll get their comeuppance, right? And I believe that because it makes me feel better. That's why I have faith in it. But things that don't make me feel better, I don't believe. I don't have faith in them. I just base them on evidence. And whether I live on a ball or a flat, it doesn't make me feel differently either way. So I just go with the evidence. And there's evidence pointing in all different directions. So I hold back on my belief. And I find, for most cases, the least beliefs, the fewer beliefs that I have, the better off my thinking is. I think most people's minds are just cluttered with so many beliefs because they feel they have to believe something. And the central point that I'm trying to make to people is, you don't have to believe that TransAsia was a hoax or that it was real. You don't have to believe that the Earth is a ball or that it's flat. You don't have to believe that there are paid shills, that they're definitely not. You don't have to believe anything. You just go where the evidence goes, and that's what I'm trying to do. And David, I know you've got a very important thing to get to later today. I'm not sure how public it is, so I won't say any more. Do you want to give us your final thoughts, and then Matrix and I can wrap up?
I'll just end with in the chat, Lone Zen Warrior said, "If you stop asking questions, we aren't paying attention." And I agree with that. Always ask questions, because we believed in the ball until we started asking questions. So ask questions all the time. And John, I appreciate your skepticism at times.
Even though you have to force it out at the end of an impromptu chat. I appreciate that, David. Thank you for that, mate. Hey, maybe if I keep getting you on my show, eventually you and Patricia will invite me onto Truth is Stranger Than Lies. How's that sound?
Sorry, you're not on the list. Hey, by the way, one thing before I go, because we're controlling the movement, your boss, Netin, whatever his name is, he sent the check for Lesta to me because of your new address. So do you want me to forward to your address in Israel or your P.O. box in Australia?
Look, whatever's more convenient for you, mate. So I know I'll get it eventually. They always pay up, my friends in Israel. They're good with money. So I know I can trust you.
All right. So long, everybody.
Cheers, mate.
See you, Dave.
All right. Okay, so that was David Weiss of Deep Inside the Rabbit Hole. Agent Weiss, as I prefer to call him when we're not live on the air. Matrix, we'll wrap it up soon. It is well past my bedtime here. I've got to get up early tomorrow, but a bit more time. It's always fun to have these impromptu chats, and David and I did kind of hog the air for a bit there. So what are your thoughts on everything that's come so far?
Yeah, I mean, it's about having the discussion, asking the difficult questions, and making your decisions based upon the evidence that you've come across. I mean, I think people have different interpretations of the evidence and on different stages of their truth seeking, and you can put different pieces of the larger picture, the puzzle pieces together, and from that we don't have the full puzzle, but we have pieces of it, so we put it together and we make the best decision based on what we can see. And whether you want to remain skeptical about everything, I mean, it is about being skeptical. That's why we're here. We're skeptical of the mainstream narrative, what we've been told, and so on. So we're just investigating that thing, and having a discussion like this is good. And taking it to the extremes of like like you do to some extent is interesting and useful. But then, for me, my choice to say that I'm a flat earther at this point in time is based on the evidence that I've come across. So, yeah, I think it's good to have a civil discussion and not be foul-mouthed and so on. Yeah, I think it's cool, man. I think there's lots to say. The flat Earth is an umbrella topic, so much is involved in that. It's not just about the Earth being flat; it's about disproving the mainstream science and the lies we're being told by the mainstream and so on. So, and it goes back, a long way. And you're investigating all kinds of things. Where did this story come from? The Ball Earth story. How far back does it go? What is the evidence of that, and so on? It all kind of interconnects. And flat Earth is you could call it a vehicle for getting the message out and questioning literally everything in our existence, what we see around us. And it's something so profound because we can actually go outside and question what is happening with the sun, what is happening with the moon and the stars and so on. So it's a case of figuring all of that out. And then, whether you want to be completely skeptical of everything, or whether you can say, I have enough evidence to say, this is what I believe at this point in time. And if people show me more evidence that changes me in a little way here or there, then I welcome that. It's all about the truth for me.
Yeah, that's fair enough, mate. In the live chat, they're saying that they can hear music. I can't hear any music. Can you?
No.
No, I'm not sure what they're talking about. Live chat, let us know if you can still hear it. But what we're going to do is we're going to wrap it up in about 10 or 15 minutes. That'll be a 2-hour show, which I think is a good length. It makes it easy for people to listen to, and it's a nice round figure. So we've got about 10 or 15 here, Matrix. And I did touch on those 6 key assumptions of the Ball Earth model, the spinning Ball Earth model. I'm not sure if you got a chance to check out the video, but the 6 assumptions are, in quick summary, assumption 1, that we can know the circumference of the Earth. And of course, supposedly they found that out thousands of years ago with shadows and wells. The mass of the Earth, which they supposedly found out 200 years ago by hanging heavy balls from the roof of a shed. That's the official story, by the way. That's not my story. That's their story. Go look into it. Eratosthenes and Cavendish, respectively. Then there are 2 assumptions about what we call space. The first is that there's a vacuum out there, a big vacuum. There's this, it's based on this assumption that this vacuum exists. Okay, and again, I call these assumptions because what's your proof? And the second assumption is that this space is littered with giant solid physical objects that we call planets, right? Places that you could actually go and land. And again, it's an assumption. If you believe in the moon landings, okay, you can believe in that assumption if you want. If you have half a brain and you've worked out that the moon landings were completely and obviously fake, then you realize you've got no evidence that they're solid physical objects. So those are your 4 primary assumptions. Then from there, you can supposedly work out the distance to one of those objects. You can supposedly work out that there's this thing called gravity that's involved in all of it. Then with all of these assumptions, you can come up with spinning Ball Earth theory, right? Now, if you reject even one of those assumptions, spinning Ball Earth theory is out the door. That's why I don't believe in spinning Ball Earth theory. Matrix, did you see the video? What did you think of the 6 assumptions?
Yeah, I saw the video. You make good points in that video. I mean, so much of the Ball Earth is based upon assumptions. Well, pretty much all of it. So you highlighted the flaws in the Ball Earth arguments with that video, I think. So yeah, I think it's good. It's a good video, man.
Well, I appreciate that, mate. What I showed earlier in the show was this thing of the hoax hierarchy, right? And we did get to talk about it, which I'm glad about. But I want to make this point a little bit clearer. This is why it's so important for the lie system that people are kept at baby hoax level. Because you can know all about Cassidy State, LAX, whatever, and if you're just talking about that, but never talking about the Apollo missions, then you're probably never going to progress to NASA fakery. And if you never progress to NASA fakery, then you'll never realize that some of the key assumptions that you base your worldview on about space, you've got no evidence for. Because if you think the Apollo missions were real, then you probably think NASA's real. So you've got no reason to question what they say about Mars being a solid physical object, or about Jupiter being a solid physical object, or about the sun being a solid physical object, right? So it's not just that NASA says that we live on a giant spinning ball. It's more than that. It's the fundamental assumptions that those things that we see in the sky are solid physical objects, right? So to get to NASA fakery, for most people, they go through the Apollo fakery because that's so easy. I mean, you look at the footage from Apollo 17 in particular, it's so obviously fake that if you can't see that, there's just no hope for you, right? But if you can see that these are fake, you should be able to see that Apollo is fake. Then you should be able to move from there to NASA fakery. And at that point, you realize you've got no reason to believe that what we're told are solid physical objects in the sky are actually solid physical objects. So that's why it's so important that people progress through the hoax hierarchy. But if you can be kept here at the red line, at the baby hoaxes, then you'll never ever progress in really changing your worldview. Now, that was the point that I was making earlier, Matrix, and this is why I want to stress this hoax hierarchy. I used to be stuck down here, and that was because I used to think that I was part of a community where people were truly investigating things. But I didn't realize they were all just investigating, looking at the same bunch of baby hoaxes, right? And sometimes I do wonder with Flat Earth if there are people who are, now that they believe that Flat Earth is the biggest thing, they're also getting stuck on a very narrow line of thought. Now, I know you're going to say, oh, that it ties into everything. Sure. But you could say the same thing about, you know, the ISIS terror tour. That ties into a lot of things as well. But if you never looked beyond baby hoaxes, you'd never move on with understanding the liar system. Is it possible the same thing's happening with Flat Earth?
For me, as I said, it's an umbrella topic that covers, you know, everything that of our existence, what we've been told. So, you know, it depends where you start. I mean, for people to not see the Apollo missions and to see the Apollo missions, I think they're real. I mean, that's really unfortunate for them, and you know, it's a starting point of seeing the fakery of NASA. So then we start investigating more of that. We start questioning the other missions and the ISS and what the lack of photographs of Earth from space and video and so on, and how that, you know, appears to be what it is. And so it's a big part of the deception. You know, you said ISIS Tower World Tour, whatever. I mean, that's just a small part of this media deception. You know, but what Flat Earth does is make us look at the bigger picture of media deception. So, and you know, what is the meaning of life? I mean, that's really the big question. And where we are, who we are, why we're here. You know, these are big existential questions. And you know, for people to ignore the importance of where we are and the underlying potential for mind control of deceiving us on such a big scale that it makes us putty in their hands once they've done that. You know, for the people to fail to see the importance of investigating this subject matter is beyond me. I mean, these people, if they want to focus on the little fake news stories and stay there, then they're really just that's as far as they're going to go. And you know,
yeah, but they don't realize that. That's the point I'm making. In their world, it's like, oh my God, they're lying to us about school shootings. This is huge. I can't believe the rabbit hole goes that deep. But if they don't know, if they never take the time to look at other things, then that'll continue to be the biggest thing in their world. Is it possible that a lot of flat earthers, maybe including yourself, my good man, you think that flat earth is the biggest thing, but by believing that, you're limiting your ability to see other hoaxes that might actually be even bigger than the shape of the earth? Is that possible?
I think it's different because it encapsulates so many different aspects of life, and it's an existential subject, flat earth. So you know, it's all about why we're here, like I said, and you know, and where we are. So it's a very important aspect, and it's not stopping me from looking at other things. I'm open to other things for sure.
Is it possible that maybe in 12 months' time, we'll be sitting here doing an impromptu chat number 7 or 8, and we'll both be talking about how important ball earth skepticism was in our path, but ultimately we've moved beyond it, and now there's actually bigger hoaxes that we feel that we can prove that are even more important than the shape of the earth?
Yeah, it's a matter of perspective on what hoax is bigger than the other. I mean, existential hoax. I mean, that's what it's really about, isn't it? You know, our reality, the nature of our reality, where we are. Are we in a matrix? Are we living in a creation? Are we living in a Big Bang, Darwinian evolution kind of thing? You know, these are the real deep questions that we need to ask ourselves, and this is kind of underlies everything else. So I don't think flat Earth is a dead end or like a way to stop people, you know, a limited hangout. I think it encapsulates everything from, you know, where we've got the information from, how far back it goes. It leads you into investigating all kinds of subject matters. That's why I say it's an umbrella subject.
Well, I tell you what, as a benefit, because obviously the video that I did with the hoax hierarchy, I only showed the first 3 levels: baby level, toddler level, kiddie level, right? I didn't actually reveal what I think is at the next level, the daddy hoaxes. But I can tell you right now, the shape of the earth is one of them. The other one, well, the other 2 can wait, right? But the shape of the earth is definitely, to me, a huge aspect of this. But for me, there is a level above that. And I've been spending the last few months in particular preparing a video series that I've got coming out about that. But for me, I needed to go through ball air skepticism and do a lot of research, do a lot of reading, do a lot of thinking, do a lot of discussing, spending time reflecting before I was able to realize, actually, I think the hoax hierarchy goes higher again. And I'm hoping that a lot of people at this level will be able to come along for the ride to the next level. But I know from experience that a lot of people, once they find their level, that's exactly where they stay. And once you move beyond it, a lot of them turn on you. There are people who don't want anyone else going the next level beyond. Some will say, oh, that's because they're paid shills. I think there are other explanations. I mean, look at our friend Jeffrey. He was the king hoax buster. Once something came along that was bigger than hoax busting, he had a vested interest just as a regular person. He could be a regular person to keep people from going any further. Maybe he really does believe in a truth movement, right? Maybe he really does believe talking about no planes on 9/11 or the whole hoax and NASA fakery is going to harm the truth movement. Maybe he really does believe that. Well, guess what? When I move beyond the daddy hoax level onto this next level, I'm expecting there are going to be people at the daddy hoax level who'll come out and say, oh no, John LeBon's going to discredit all of us who are talking about how we don't live in a ball. Now he's talking about this, he's going to discredit us. I've seen it all before, and I've got a funny feeling, Matrix, I'm going to see it again.
Yeah, it depends. I mean, I think I'm aware of where you're heading with this, because we talked a little bit about it, I think. But it depends on your perception on what you prioritize as the granddaddy of hoaxes. The flat Earth is a big one. And so it depends on your perception and perspective. And what is important to you. Some people are obsessed with 9/11, and I was kind of obsessed with that, and it's part of the journey that we're on. Last year I was into hoax busting, having fun with that and enjoying that. It was a fun place to be until it all went sour, and it changed my perspective on truth seeking. I mean, I was into truth seeking before I got into the hoax busting community thing, but it was an interesting place to be with people I thought were of similar minds and interests and so on. So it really depends on the individual and what they're interested in, what subjects inspire them, which subjects capture their interest, and so it's a difficult one. What I'm trying to do is see the bigger picture, and if new things come along, we evolve with that and adapt with that information. But right now, I think flat Earth is still got plenty of way to go, and is such a profound subject that it's probably never going to go away until someone actually can disprove it with irrefutable evidence, not questionable evidence and so on. So I think there's a lot still to learn. This life appears to be a learning process from when we're born up to until whatever ages we are, and nothing will surprise me really at this point. What is bigger than flat Earth? I kind of know where you're going with it, but I don't want to say too much about it. But at this point, because you haven't put out a video about it, but I think that will lead us into another discussion of how they're all interlinked, and it's a case of connecting the dots, and it's just about the bigger picture.
Yeah, well, look, I on the one hand, I'm saying, maybe it does come across as pessimistic, but I'm expecting that once I start discussing what I think is the next level, there'll be a few people stuck at one level who won't come along for the ride, and they'll possibly even attack me. But what I do also know from experience is that there are a small group of people, I think they're a minority, but they are willing to look at other things as well. And so when I think the granddaddy hoax starts getting talked about more, there will be plenty who will come along as well. And I think 2016 could be a very exciting year, maybe just as exciting as last year. But this time around, it won't be the shape of the Earth. It'll be at issue. There'll be other things. And we can discuss all of those in a future episode. But Matrix, it's almost 1 o'clock here. I need to get going to bed. You can probably tell from my voice I'm a little bit tired. So what we'll do is I'll give you a chance now and take a couple of minutes if you have to, just to give us your final thoughts on the whole episode. This is the TransAsiaversary, of course. So bear in mind, of course, that my heart does go out to the families of the victims of that terrible, terrible tragedy. And give us your final thoughts on TransAsia, the fallout that followed, the year that's been since then, flat Earth, ball Earth skepticism, the hierarchy of hoaxes. Is there anything you want to say? Now's the chance.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's good to have an impromptu chat again. It's about time we got back to doing this, and you know, yeah, TransAsia, that was a big turning point in the community, and it came about at the same time as the flat Earth, and you know, people have gone their different ways. You know, chosen sides, if you like. Some people have, and some people haven't chosen sides and would prefer to remain neutral. You know, I started off the show. You asked me, you know, Agent Matrix. You know, Jeff C's just put out a video. He mentions me the first time, and you know, Jeff thinks I'm Australian, and it just goes to show the lack of research that he's done. You know, I'm English, as you've mentioned many times, and I've mentioned many times, and it's just more assumptions that he's making. And you know, you have to do better research than that to start calling people being shills. And he thinks I'm an Australian agent working with you, John, and you know, it's just absurd. And yeah, you know, this whole debate about, you know, it's all about truth seeking, and you know, flat Earth and ball Earth skepticism is a part of that, and to deny that and to tell people not to look into it because they believe it's they don't believe it's the case. You know, that's just wrong. You know, people should be making up their own minds, looking at all sides of the evidence. And doing their own investigation, not relying on leaders. And yeah, it's great, man. I mean, yeah, I enjoy these chats, man. So thanks.
Oh, cool, man. I appreciate that. And listen, in the live chat, we've had about between 50 and 60 people watching live, and they're just leaving their feedback now, and a lot of it is very positive. One of the questions was, can people get in touch with us on Skype? My email address is johnthebond123@gmail.com. Just send me through an email, and we can converse that way. And I am very lucky doing this, Matrix. I'm sure you are as well. People do take the time to get in touch and to share their thoughts and their ideas and their feedback, and even constructive criticism. You know, I've had a couple of emails that have come through and people have said, look, I agree with this bit. Have you thought about that? It's also useful. And for me, if there was a genuine truth community, it would be about people doing that, saying, hey, here's your perspective, here's my perspective. You know, where can we help each other? Have you thought of this? Have you seen this? It's so useful to me, and I've got a lot of good stuff from it. I mean, you mentioned that Ushuaia thing earlier, episode 7 of the Baller Skeptic Roundtable. I brought that up live on the air with Stinky Cash, and I'd heard about it through, I think it was Jordan Rains. It might have been somebody else, but somebody in the live chat had said, you know, Ushuaia, blah, blah, blah. I checked it out, brought it up with Stinky Cash, right? This is good stuff. You know, that's what we're looking for. That's what I'm looking for anyways. People saying, hey, here are some ideas, here's some information. Is it useful to you? And I always take it on board. So johnthebond123@gmail.com. Hit me up on an email. We can have a Skype chat. That'd be great. And I am thinking maybe, Matrix, I don't want to say too much right now, but maybe in the future there might be scope for another show that does focus more on the questions rather than focusing on the perceived answers, and focus more on the information rather than the personalities. Because I'm sure you'll agree lately it does seem like a lot of people have gotten very sucked into the drama and the personality. And I think I've been listening back to the Baller Skeptic Roundtable lately, Matrix, and what I noticed is that we really did do a good job of avoiding all of the dramas and just focusing on the information. And I'm pretty proud about that. So if anyone has any interest in maybe working in a way like that, now's the time to get in touch, because who knows what the future might hold. And I'll try and leave it as cryptically as I can at that. Huge thanks to everyone who's tuned in, either live or on delay. I do recommend that people just download these, rip them to mp3, go for a walk. That's what I do. If there's a podcast I like, I download it, rip it to mp3, go for a walk, listen, get out amongst the trees. If you live anywhere near trees, go out and walk, listen, think about things. You'll be much better for it. Don't sit and listen to me or Matrix or David for 2 hours on a computer chair. That's the worst thing you can do. Get out there, go for a walk, have a listen. I recommend you do. Not really much more for me to add right now. I usually finish with a song. It's a bit late for that right now. I do live with other people. Don't want to wake anybody up. So we're not going to finish with music tonight. Just finish with a thank you and a goodbye. And 2 channels, John the Bond Extra, John the Bond. I'll link to Matrix Decode in the info box below as well. Go and check those channels out if you haven't already. I'll leave David Weiss's channel as well. I might even leave a link to Truth is Stranger Than Fiction if I feel like it. If I'm not welcome, then maybe he's not welcome either. We'll see how we go. But thanks to everyone. And if you are out there, Jeffy or Pressy Poo, hey, listen, I might joke, but I think you guys are probably just misguided guys. And if you ever do get over your belief in NASA, you'd be more than welcome. In fact, I might even invite you on the show in the future, because you're not my enemies. I'm not yours. I'm here for the truth. If you guys are as well, nothing's stopping us from working together in the future. But that's it for now. on the 4th and a little bit of the 5th of February 2016 on the TransAsia anniversary, 1 year since the big day. I've enjoyed this. Thank you, Matrix. Thank you, David. And to all of you out there, until next time, take care of yourselves.